I think in the field of art and writing, you really need to learn to communicate. You need to be able to not only express yourself in your art, but express yourself verbally and be able to hold your own in a conversation.
Welcome back. This is the Pencil Kings podcast. Today we are talking again with Chris and Enrico about Artistacon. If you missed it, you can go to pencilkings.com. There's a little search, looks like a magnifying glass. You can click that, and then you can type in Artistacon, Artistacon, and get the previous episode when the event hadn't happened yet. So I wanted to have Chris and Enrico back to see how it did go because it was the first time having a convention. I would secretly like to have a Pencil Kings convention at some point. I don't know how that's all going to work. So I'm just going to learn and ask my self-serving questions. But the feedback that people had, I remember talking with James on Facebook. He's one of the members of Pencil Kings inside the community, one of our, I would call like standout members. He's always in there being busy. He really enjoyed it. He took his family. So welcome to the call, guys. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Great.
Thanks for having us back.
Yeah, I'm excited because could you just tell us first off to start, we will just explain what is Artistacon. What was it when people went, just to catch the listeners up so that we set this call up so we know what we're talking about to start off.
Okay. Well, basically it was a 2-day conference or convention, whatever you want to use as the terminology, but I look at it as more as a educational symposia. We had about 26 guest artists and writers from various fields, including not only comic books and fantasy art, but traditional fine artists as well as writers that work in the comic and fantasy industry. And the whole idea was to as our tagline says, celebrate the creative process and mentor in a new generation of artists. So basically, we were bringing these artists in to pretty much, convey their knowledge to the attendee. And we had an offering of about 20 lecture, panel, and like a workshop setting between the 2 days. We also had a kickoff event the night before, Drink and Draw, which was part of the Artistacon schedule. And I mean, drink and draws are very popular these days where, people gather and draw from live costume models. Well, we had ours at a venue where we had food for the guests, and the people from the public as well as the attendees came in to draw costume models. We had a Wonder Woman and a Superman, and really great costumes. He's a professional cosplay designer, and that hit it off really, broke the ice, I thought, with a lot of the guest artists.
Yeah, they were more modern costumes based off of like Batman versus Superman films, so they were really well done, like movie quality.
Yeah, excellent.
So everybody came out and had a real good time. With the models drawing and meeting everyone, and that kicked off sort of the networking portion of our event. So my little concise pitch for Artistacon is when people ask me what it is, I say it's an educational symposium and networking event for creatives, basically is what it is, and that's kind of what it turned out to be exactly, with a few little changes that we didn't expect, like here and there.
Yeah, but you go through all these your first year out, hiccups, so to speak, but turn into happy accidents.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It all, for all intents and purposes, we were very happy with the turnout. Of course, more people is always a goal, but I think from what we did for our first showing over a 2-day period,
it's going to grow.
It's going to grow, and the feedback from the attendees as well as the guest, creatives, was only positive, really. We didn't really have any, major complaints. There's some logistical issues, but, overall it all worked out. And what was nice is we originally scheduled portfolio reviews to be in a separate room, but the community of the Artists Alley was kind of intimate. So they started doing the reviews right at their Artist Alley table. So it kind of brought other people behind the person being reviewed, and it created a nice camaraderie between seasoned artists, emerging artists, someone who was a writer. There were artists in the Artist Alley that hadn't seen each other for years, that used to work at Marvel together at DC. So I think what we really hope to continue is this feeling of camaraderie, this feeling of, you're going to come out of there with some sort of tangible thing you can go home and, apply to your creative process. I mean, we had someone that attended that was kind of in a funk, said, they've been going in and out of, not knowing what to do. I don't want to, I haven't drawn in such a long time. But after they took the visual storytelling class with Bob McLeod, they went home and they started drawing, and they did Inktober, and they've just been drawing ever since. So it's nice to hear when you get that kind of validation from an attendee. And that person came late, could only come for one day. So even then, that small portion of, a complete symposium of 2 days, that little bit hit that person so, poignantly, to the point where they got out of their funk, picked up their pencil, and started drawing, and
applied what they ran into it, and discovered it at Artistacon.
So to me, that speaks volumes more than anything, and I think that was our whole goal of Artistacon. I think, as you and Pencil Kings and others do, we're out there to help artists. I was listening to a clip from John Shindahede, who was one of our guests of honor. And he's such a positive person. Also, John Wellington, who you just interviewed, was one of our guests of honor. And they all have all this great advice. And I think the thing that they pull from it mostly is that you have to launch your mind into a successful mode. You got to say, I am going to succeed, instead of accepting what I have failed at. And a failure is only a lesson in what to do to move forward. And everybody goes through a failure more than once, and it's a learning experience. I've listened to your other podcasts where people are living out of their cars and they say, I'm giving it, they have stuck to it and it pays off. I think what was really nice, and one of the young ladies that attended saying, she's kind of quiet and kind of shy, but when she came to Artistacon, it wasn't an unapproachable type of artist show where some shows, the younger people feel like, well, I can't go up and talk to the seasoned artist. There might be a cliquish feeling or something like that. But I think what we had was a very open atmosphere, and like in a workshop called Creating Exciting Characters of Mike Gustovich, he asked how many people are artists and how many people are writers, and all the people raised their hands saying both. And actually, that's kind of the theme of the show, narrative. We are exploring visual storytelling. And, one of the guests of honor really wrote the book on it. It's the DC Comics Guide to Creating Comics, The Art of Visual Storytelling, Carl Potts. And fantastic lecture, but I highly recommend picking up this book, because it not only talks about comics, but it talks about storytelling in ways that you've never even really thought about it. Because there's a lot of parallel to filmmaking. There's a lot of parallel to photography and how you set up a shot. And it's really a wealth of information. And he breaks it down so nicely. And he has a foreword talking about his own experiences getting into the field, working with the greats back in the day when he was starting out. And there's a little right up at the front from Jim Lee, who I find it kind of a nice way he puts it. He calls it BC and before Carl and after Carl.
Yeah, AC.
AC.
Yeah, Carl had such a great turnout at his symposium and his lecture. I was there for that, doing a little bit of moderating and sitting in, and it was fantastic. He went through a lot of things in person from this book, and just to hear him, to talk about it and kind of go over these things was a pleasure, and I think everyone there got a ton out of it. But one of the things I really, really love about how Artistacon turned out is that I've heard multiple people already like email me and tell me that, you know, when we're kind of getting together, tell me how they connected with people already. So the networking aspect of it was made a big splash, you know. So there's already people that have hooked up with some of the guests or other attendees and are already working on projects together or getting involved in things. And that's exactly what I wanted Artistacon to be, and what I wanted, you know, to happen is for people to network and then end up actually following through and getting somewhere with it. And then that happened. And of course, all of the lectures we had was just like a wealth of information. And some of them, like John Wellington's, were like exploded. There was just so many people going there that we had to go over.
His painting demos were very, very good. If you go onto the website, you can actually see a synopsis of what the symposia, the workshops, and the panels were. I have to tweak it a little bit to show the actual write-ups, because once the event happened, it kind of disappears off the website, but you can still see the listing of it. What also is important to know is where you're concerned, Mitch, is when you do a show like this, you really got to pull a team of great people together, and we were lucky to have that. We were lucky to have, you know, besides Enrico and I, both our wives, a man called Sean Stippick who ran the venue for us. He went well out of his way to help us with the website and marketing and every little thing you can think of, all the way down to the nitty-gritty of the day. We also had a young couple that runs Camden Comic-Con out of Rutgers University in Camden. They came on board, and they were fantastic. Bill Haas, Miranda Powell. I mean, we can't thank them enough, because that was this is their fourth year coming out as con leaders. And, you know, I think they started with 400 people their first year, and they're now up to past 2,000 they're projecting for this year. So the fact that they came on and endorsed us was fantastic. We've also gotten a lot of great feedback from people that go to a Luxicon, which, if you know of anything about a Luxicon, is a grand fantasy show every year in the fall that happens in Pennsylvania. And it was talked up quite a bit there, which was great. And Jeannie and Patrick, that or both of them, husband and wife, Patrick and Jeannie or Patrick, whichever way you want to go.
Yeah, but overall,
they've been nothing but supportive.
Yeah, overall, everything's been so positive, and just it's been awesome because everything has been like I said, positive, and Artistacon is getting legs. You know, everybody's talking about it. We got, you know, buzz going, and everyone's talking about it in a good light, and people have actually walked away with valuable new experiences and valuable new connections. So you really can't ask for more, you know. And
I think we want to expand on the educational side, absolutely, bring in more of a workshop environment to, you know, have more of group involvement, whereas it's not just also, you know, in a lecture where someone's just, you know, feeding it out and giving it back. I would like, you know, round table stuff and things where people are involved, and maybe some hands-on demonstrations, or, you know, you're actually painting with the painter, you know, like in the painting demo. You know, there's a lot we, you know, have the ability to do. We're just now kind of maneuvering our way and tweaking it. Now we've outgrown, I feel, the venue, so we're in the negotiation stage with another venue. We hope to bring in some new artists and maybe focus also on, I'm getting a lot of requests for children's avenue. So we had some artists that are dealing in children's book, but I had a lot of attendees who happen to be children's book illustrators, well known in the field. And we're talking about doing like a workshop or a panel on children's book art. We're looking to beef up the sculpture side for toy making, action figures, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I ended up doing an impromptu sculpture demonstration at my table.
Yeah.
That was pretty
actually,
pretty fun.
He helped John Wellington on some tips that John's been doing on his bunker sculpts. Mm-hmm. And since he worked in Castelline a lot, Enrico, you know,
well, I was able to give him a couple little tiny tidbits.
But John, it was nice because there was that give and take. So, you know, John was there to do his painting demo, but he picked up some tips from Enrico, who worked with the medium for years. So it was a lot of great camaraderie. The attendees were very gracious. The guests of honor and featured artists were as well. John Shindetti says, one thing's for sure, I've never been fed so well at a convention. We aim to please for hospitality.
That's some of the feedback that wanted to ask you guys about, because this isn't the kind of feedback that I would expect to get from a first time out. And I know I'd asked you about this not on a recording, Chris, but how are you able to organize all this stuff and have such a good first show? And hopefully we can get some takeaways, because I feel like for those of you who don't know, who are listening and have never been to a Comic-Con, so there's the big Comic-Con in San Diego that a lot of people talk about as like the con to go to. And you go, and I feel like as an artist, it's a little bit like it's overwhelming that there's so many fans there that you're waiting in line and you feel like you should have an elevated status because you're also a creator. And then you're waiting in line with somebody who's a fan of these artists, and we need the fans to buy the work. Otherwise, we can't do our creative work. So there's a part for everybody, but the fans overwhelm in these things, or at least that's the feeling. And then you're kind of like, oh my gosh, there's like 20 billion people here, and all I want to do is ask this one person really one question or get feedback on one piece, but it feels impossible, and it's a little bit disheartening. So I'm glad to see that there's shows like yours and other ones that are coming up, and I'm just curious about some insight into how to make it so good on your first time out, so that if somebody else is thinking about this, like I am, I don't know if it will happen or not, but if let's say that there's somebody who's in Cleveland and they're like, you know what, I'm inspired by this. I would like to do something. What are some of the things that, or what are some of the, we don't want to get too far into the weeds. We want to keep it pretty high level, but what are the kind of overarching thoughts that you brought to this that helped you have such a great first show?
I think being like such a more intimate show and having a definite like mission statement and a point to get across, a focus, helped a ton. And then on top of that, it's like the amazing team we put in, and then putting a lot of thought into what all our programming was. You know,
right? The
I think
programming.
So,
I think the programming is what people were very. In fact, some people said there was so much programming. Yeah, you need an extra day because you're rushing between going from one to the another. Because we had a spillover venue, which was like a block away. And this is one thing that I highly suggest is you get a venue with infrastructure completely in one place, including audio-visual, tables, everything. Because that we had a little bit of hiccups with table delivery and things like that. But I want to get back to San Diego and New York Comic-Con. Those are the two biggest. Now, I consider, from what I understand, I've never been to San Diego. San Diego really is a con for the movie stars.
It's like another world. I've gone.
Yeah, the most well-known artists, they go, but it's really not considered for a creators conference. I mean, it is. New York is definitely more creator-centered, but it's overwhelming too. Baltimore Comic-Con is a great example of a creator-centered con. They bring in about 8,000 people. They know what they're doing. They have that aspect where you can go up into the artist's alley and kind of have that talk with the artist or writer face-to-face. So our mission was to kind of, as we had said on the original interview, kind of strip away all the fan layers, but not disregard the fan, because people that came weren't necessarily artists. We had a father who came back the second day because he was so impressed. He goes, I wasn't going to come back. I was just bringing my daughter the first day. He goes, but you brought in people that I grew up with, and I got so much out of it, and I used to write, and I'm going to go home and start writing a book. So these are things you didn't even plan for to hear, so I think the key is, if anybody's really wanting to experience this type of an intimate atmosphere, is to come out and not sit on and watch it on YouTube or something like that. There is an organic quality, a camaraderie. You made new friendships. You created a networking atmosphere, as Enrico said, and projects, have been now created between other people. You don't know what's going to happen down the road.
Yeah, I think at a high level, if you're like asking for people that are interested in trying to run something like this, like a convention or a symposium, like you were saying, I think to rope it all in, it's sort of like get your mission statement and your focus, so know what you want to present, and then put your programming together and try to make that as best as possible and get that real tight so you know what you want to present. Then line up all your guests, and after you have that all taken care of, look into what venue is going to accommodate that vision and those guests. After you have that venue put together, then you can work out all the granular details to make sure you put everything together. But I think that's kind of like the formula. Right. Oh, and I left out, put together an amazing team. We had a great team of organizers, project managers, and volunteers to come in and make sure everyone was being ushered in the right direction, make sure everyone knew where to go to hand out our collateral and, like our folders, our registration, like which events or symposium lectures were in which building, where the drink and draw was, that kind of stuff. So just that we had good people in place to direct everyone. And that's kind of like the final piece of the puzzle as far as I'm concerned, I think.
And I'm just reading off a young lady who posted up on her blog who came, and she makes a good point here, especially for young emerging artists. She says, don't be afraid to go to a convention by yourself, because you might just be surprised, and Artistacon was one of those surprises. My greatest wish for this convention as it expands is to keep its inclusive identity. It's a strong asset and probably one of the greatest ways to mentor emerging talent. She basically says, make a long story short, stay inclusive, stay diverse. And she's basically complimenting us here, saying your love for your ingenuity and mentoring atmosphere, and I hope these qualities are always with you. And basically thanking us. So, I mean, she really wrote a nice, heartfelt post on her blog.
Yeah, that was great.
And, that's payment enough. When the attendees give you a thumbs up, and not only the attendees, the guests. I mean, John Shindetti was at Artistacon doing his 4-hour version of creative entrepreneurship lecture that he did 1 hour at ours, and I was at Artistacon helping set up, and then I was at the show, and I was introducing myself to people I haven't met, and I said, my name's Chris Kotsakis, and they said, are you a fantasy illustrator? I said, well, I'm an illustrator, and I have a show called Artistacon. I get, Artistacon. I kept going, left and right. It's like, that was getting to be a little overwhelming that it spread like that. And
it's fantastic that it did. And,
yeah.
And we have a lot of nice lessons learned, and we're going to, apply them to next year. And a lot of that is streamlining venue, that way everybody has everything kind of in one location, or the closest proximity as possible that we can get, and tightening up programming, which we kind of already had really nice and tight already.
We had a lot of traditional demos, and we're pushing more also for some digital stuff, with whether it be, painting in Corel Paint or Photoshop, digital sculpting with ZBrush, those kind of things we're looking to, move into. So the idea was, in the first outing, was to, really focus on, what goes into creating great visual storytelling. And as we progress, we can get into more of the actual media and what people use, and what, if they're working traditionally or digital, or how they bridge from traditional to digital, or work in both. So the idea, I think, this year was we showed how a fine artist like Dave Palumbo went from being trained as a fine artist and does a lot of work in the properties of Aliens versus Predator, cover work, and for Dark Horse. So you have a fine artist working in fantasy and comic book properties, and they bridge back into fine art doing whatever, a portrait or whatever they, gallery work. John Wellington's a good example of that. I mean, he's a well-known fine artist. Now his work sought after, yet he used to be a colorist for Marvel Comics. We don't know what avenue life's going to take, and I always say, keep an open mind, and when you follow that path, if it diverges, go left, go right, it really doesn't matter. I mean, one door opens as the other door closes, and I think a lot of people, when you're listening to podcasts, is like, how do I
started?
How do I kickstart myself? How do I I have a failure to launch.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think going to these shows, listening to podcasts. I mean, I've been listening to Pencil Kings like crazy the past 3 weeks. I'm catching up now, but it's just like, listen to Ken Murphy and some of, he's like, I have friends that can paint around me with all these different kinds of technique. Yet, I have the ability to go out and market myself in a way that they don't because they're in the studio. I mean, all these little aspects add up to furthering your own development. Yeah. I don't care what level you're at, emerging or seasoned. I think you're always on a learning path, and we always will find a mentor at some stage in our life. And, hopefully the older generation of artists start giving back as they always have through the ages. And that's what Artistacon's about. We see a lot of young people coming out, and they're just, they don't know which way to maneuver. Mm-hmm. They could go and be the cog in the wheel, so to speak, working for comic books as an inker, or a colorist, or working on a video game
do
property.
Their own independent stuff.
Or they can create an independent aspect, going to, from a napkin, an idea on a napkin to completion. So you have people that want to be the entrepreneurial type. You have the people that say, I just want to go in and pencil artwork for a comic book. But, everybody's path is different. But I think what Artistacon brings is something that we're not just focused on fantasy. We're not just focused on writing. We're not just focused on illustration. We're kind of combining everything into what is visual storytelling, what is narrative. How do you communicate, and that's part of through your art or your writing, and that's basically what we want to expand upon.
I always say you make your own luck, and part of making your own luck is attending these shows and getting yourself out there and contributing, participating in the networking aspect of it, and learning new things from these lectures. And you never know who you're going to run into. And you never know where that path is going to lead, but you got to make your own luck, get yourself out there, and then you'll get lucky, and get something that you really, really want, or it'll turn into something else that's entirely different and awesome. But, another thing, for just getting back to the question of advice, I would say also for running a convention, or don't be afraid of technology. And don't be afraid to think out of the box and try to do things that aren't normal. Like if things pop up, like I have a particular incident in mind. So we had an issue, or that could have become an issue, but we used technology and thought outside the box to continue this particular lecture, and that was with Sean O'Reilly of Arcana Comics, who ended up missing his flight.
Well, actually, the flight was canceled.
Oh yeah, I got smart. The flight was canceled, and he couldn't get to to New Jersey to do the event. However,
we Skyped him.
We put our heads together and used technology to get him there anyway. So go ahead. You can tell the story.
We set up the laptop through the projector, and we Skyped him through Vancouver to New Jersey, and it went very successful. Yeah, actually, I think there was an interesting quality about it, that we kind of had people gathered around, and it was, he had multiple windows opening, and he was just really getting into it. And he's like, I need to do this
it's like a virtual, we ended up unintentionally creating like a virtual lecture area.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that now we can offer. We can perfect it, which we're looking into, and then offer that, so we can have people that couldn't maybe come to Artistacon as guests or featured lecture personas.
Right.
But we can have them anyway and do it as this virtual lecture kind of thing. So, always keep in mind that you can use these different technologies we have available to us every day as, something useful in the putting the convention together,
Yeah, and we had a strong side. I think a lot of business aspect of art was being relayed. We had poster and pop art with Dave Peroni and Glaubinger. They really went in their lecture about licensing and how it works. We had Carl talking about the business side, Bob McLeod. We had Mike Manley, who draws and inks the syndicated Phantom comic strip, as well as Judge Parker for King Syndicate. So, we were getting aspects of the business side from a lot of different venues of or whatever genre they're in. So, but it all came back down to, focus and market yourself. And also, one of the big things that stood out was be comfortable in explaining what you are as an artist. Learn to come to terms with what you want to do, but also what you want to convey. So I think, for overall, we had happy people. So.
Okay, so last question that I want to ask is, I know, Chris, you told me that some people didn't come out and then they were kicking themselves later and saying like, oh, if I'd known, then I would have went out. And I would just like to, I mean, we've already talked about how all these connections happen when you get outside of your comfort zone, or if you just leave your house and go and meet somebody in person, that never happen online. Like you would just be amazed at how many good things happen when you meet somebody in person. But what would you say to those people who, just now publicly, and be like, some piece of advice? And it's not just Artistacon, because it's just life, right? And I know I'm bad at this. I see, oh, it's snowing outside, I'm not doing nothing this weekend. But there could be something amazing happening, but you just don't know. So what would you say to these people, and maybe just give them a gentle kick in the butt to go out and see some of these shows? Because one of the great things that I thought about Artistacon, and I think I remember saying that, wow, you guys are crazy for the low price point that you had. You wanted to make it accessible to everybody, mm-hmm. and it was, it didn't cost very much to get a ticket to go. But what can you say to these people who are the couchers?
I would say try to push out of your comfort zone. You never know what's going to happen. A lot of people that I think sit home, or I had schoolwork, or they might miss something that they're not going to pick up in a class necessarily. I'm not saying a professional educator is not going to impart something, but someone working in the field of 15, 20 years in comics and you're in a workshop for 2 hours or 3 hours, you're going to pick up information and anecdotes and stuff that you wouldn't in a traditional art class. And I think creatives are kind of awkward in general. So I think they're, they feel awkward coming to events. But I think those that do, I had a young girl from Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. She goes, my fellow students are here, but I'm surprised they aren't here. And I said, what do you feel? She said, well, I'm going to go back and tell them. I'm like, well, yes, you don't have to tell them they're dumb, but we appreciate the enthusiasm. I said, just encourage them to come out and find out, what was it maybe that kept them away. It could be many things, that happen in life, but I think, like James said, when he went to work the next day, everybody was doing the face palm. Why didn't I go? Why didn't I go? And his boss was like, we're going to get a group of people to go next year. Yeah. So, I mean, they're all into comics. They're all artists themselves and designers. So I think take a chance.
I heard this one time before and it really stuck in my head. The difference between the haves and the have-nots is that the haves actually showed up to take what they wanted.
I think from a personal perspective, I used to be a shy person. It's when I started really getting into my career and talking with people, I came out of that. And I think in the field of art and writing, you really need to learn to communicate. You need to be able to not only express yourself in your art, but express yourself verbally and be able to hold your own in a conversation. I think that goes for everybody. I'm not saying you have to be a social butterfly and jump from here and there. Everybody's nervous at these things.
I just think at least go to one. Yeah. At least go to one. My advice, really seriously, is at least go to one, because you never know until you try it. Right. And if you're worried about cost or anything like that, you just look at it as it's either entertainment, education, or
an investment.
Or an investment. Exactly. Yeah.
I look at it as an investment in your future. And that, we wanted to keep that price down to entice people to come in, and we're going to keep.
It's not an investment in our future because we have the price that you. I'm just kidding.
No, so basically, it's something I think people if they come to it, they'll enjoy it, and I think they'll spread the word and they'll come back. I mean, we're toying with the idea of a showcase for emerging artists as well, because a lot of the young people are like, well, how do I get a table? So that's also an avenue we're looking at. That might be something, we have to incorporate as an add-on. Besides just guest artists, we have the ability to showcase emerging artists, up-and-comers in their own area. So, and that's something enticing too.
All right, great. Well, next year, definitely, I'm sure we'll have you back, or we'll be sending out an announcement once Artistacon 2. I don't know what you're going to call it, but we'll call it
2017. Yeah.
Okay, Artistacon 2017. Once you have the details for that, then we'll make sure to help people get the word out. But I'm sure they can go and get on a mailing list at artistacon.com, right?
It's actually artistacon.org or .net. The com was taken, believe it or not, but. Artistic, ARTISTA. A lot of people put ICON, ACON.org or .net. And yes, there's links there to get on the mailing list. And we would love you to. And we'll send you information as this next conference unfolds.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
And as usual, we'll have show notes for this over at pencilkings.com/podcast. So if there's anything that we mentioned, I know I mentioned some different books, we'll have links to that as well. So thank you for being on the show, and we'll see you, listener, next week on the Pencil Kings podcast.
Scope demands patience, skill, years of practice.
You talk like a fool. I would trade a century of practice for an ounce of inspiration.